Blog Talk Radio.
This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
All right, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am your host, Michael Boldea, and we are back. We are not live technically, but we're close enough to live where we might as well be. We're sort of a Justice Ginsburg live. So we give off the impression of being live and animated, but not quite. So it is the same day that this program is due to air, but it is very, very cold in Wisconsin. The temperatures dipped last night, and I have to pick up my kitties from daycare because the wife has pre-existing plans at work. So here we are, but it's not as though we don't have a few things to discuss, shall we say. Wow, it's been an eventful week, has it not? We entered the year 2020, and it would seem we entered the year 2020 with a bang and not a whimper. By the way, I haven't gotten a chance to say it to you. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to the Roaring 20s. It promises to be a very tumultuous year. Let's put it that way. But we need to sort of establish what happened this past week. We need to put some meat on these bones and contextualize the situation. Because there's a lot of stuff floating in the ether. There's a lot of stuff being bandied about, even among Christian circles. And there's this new injection of fear among many believers that ought not to be there. I've gotten my fair share of emails and Facebook, messages. Is this World War III? Is it happening? Is it happening? Calm down, people. Calm down. You'll know when it's World War III because there will be nuclear weapons flying to and fro. We're not in World War III category. We're nowhere near it. This whole thing started because a little bug went ka-choo. If you don't know the book, I read it to my daughters a lot. And it's sort of an escalation from one thing to another. And last night, which was Wednesday evening, if you were to watch any of the major news channels, the presenters at least were orgasmic at the thought that the Iranians lobbed a bunch of bombs and killed a bunch of Americans. I've never seen people so mentally disturbed as the media nowadays. I was waiting for some of them to disrobe on live television and start touching themselves. They were flush in the face and eager to see dead bodies and broken bones and scattered limbs. And I think today diffused the situation somewhat. I think they were let down in a big way because Donald Trump just gave his address. And oddly enough, guess what? We're not starting World War III. So you can, mothball the bunker, back up. You can stop eating your Jim Baker potatoes au gratin. Leave the bucket alone if you did get your order, because apparently I hear there are some people that, write the check, that send the shekels with the expectation of receiving the buckets of potatoes au gratin, and they don't get them. So you're out the money with no potatoes au gratin to keep you alive. But that's okay. You still have, Piggly Wiggly. You still have the Pick and Save. You still have food for less. Those of you out on the West Coast, you still have, what's that grocery store with a P in Florida? Anyway, you can still go to the grocery store and buy food that hasn't been sitting in a plastic bucket for 12 years. The time will come where you might need the potatoes au gratin from the Jim Baker Show. But it is not that time yet, so be thankful. Go enjoy a burger. maybe even a double-double. If you're in California, you got to admit, In-N-Out makes a good burger. I know, I digress. I'm kind of hungry and I just had half a cup of coffee. So, let's get back to what led to this almost World War III. It really wasn't. All right? This is what happens when an entire media conglomerate is dead set on hyping people up. You have people thinking they were going to get drafted, that they were going to be sent off to war. Look, if we were to declare war on Iran, it would be a very short-lived war. There would be a lot of dorks with Coke bottle glasses, joysticks, and giant screens pushing buttons, because warfare has changed from the 1917s. It's changed from the 1940s. We are not sending boots on the ground in Iran. If we do get pushed into war, and yes, I said pushed into war, it'll be very quick, and there will be a lot of advanced technology that will take the place of meat and bone soldiers. So you're not getting drafted. Stop saying goodbye to your girlfriend. Because there's a guy on the internet, somebody sent it to me, and it was the saddest / funniest thing. Because as yet, I don't know if he was being truthful and honest, or if it's just a parody. He was that good, where I'm assuming that he was being honest. But he was saying goodbye to his girlfriend because he was about to get drafted and sent to World War III because the Orange Man is bad. Anyway, let's go to where all of this started. We have a lot to get through today. There are, of course, the Australian fires. Those of you that are listening to us from Australia know that you're in our prayers. Just as an aside, apparently, it's not global warming burning your country. It's ne'er-do-wells that are setting fires. They've arrested, 28 so far? And the thing that I want to find out, the thing that I am very, very curious about, is whether, A, this was an organized effort, meaning these 28 some odd people had discussed doing this amongst themselves, and B, whether or not they belong to any Save the Planet group, like, I don't know, Greenpeace or Greta Thunberg LLC or something. Because I think that some of these people will be exposed as being very militant environmentalists. And they are supremely unhappy at the fact that the planet isn't heating up quite fast enough. Global warming isn't killing us quite fast enough. And so we're unwilling, we lazy sloths, to give up our cars and our hamburgers. So they thought they'd help Mother Nature along, wink, wink. Set a few fires, kill a few animals, destroy a few cities, and then they will believe that global warming is a real thing. Well, apparently not. It's criminals with matches and gasoline. And I know that the Australian government doesn't have the death penalty, but something very, very violent should be done to these people. Because if it's not, next year, 2 years from now, there will be another round of environmentalist zealots who will attempt to, help Mother Nature along, set a few fires, kill a few people, because, as long as the omelet gets made, how many eggs you break is irrelevant. I keep trying to circle back to this guy. Apparently, they identified him by his ring. Make of that what you will. His name was General Qasem Soleimani. And I know that mass media, the propaganda wing of the Democrat Party, as it were, has a gift when it comes to rebranding monsters and criminals. They said that al-Baghdadi was an austere religious scholar. Apparently, they're trying to make Senor Soleimani seem like nothing more than a retired bodybuilder, a senior citizen with salt and pepper hair, who was dispatched by the U.S. government via a drone and some very powerful explosives at Baghdad airport. If you do a little research into Mr. Soleimani, you will discover that he was neither an austere religious scholar nor just a retired former bodybuilder. He wasn't a grandpappy and a daddy and somebody who loved his community. He was a monster. He tortured and killed people. He maimed people. He financed the torture and killing of people. The previous administration, who let's just say was a little friendlier than they ought to have been with the terrorist side of the world, even they branded Mr. Soleimani a terrorist. And I realize this is not getting, top billing in the news cycle because it goes against the narrative. But Mr. Soleimani was not supposed to leave Iran. There was an international order that said Mr. Soleimani was such a dangerous individual that he was supposed to remain within the territorial borders of Iran. Now, Mr. Soleimani was not dispatched in Iran. Mr. Soleimani had landed at Baghdad airport, which, if geography class still serves me, is in Iraq. And it was during a time when the U.S. Embassy was being attacked. We were under siege. And popular sentiment had it that Mr. Soleimani was in Iraq to plan further attacks on the U.S. Embassy because this was his wheelhouse. He planned and plotted attacks against Western concerns. We saw an opportunity. There was apparently enough intelligence that signaled that Mr. Soleimani was about to do something very naughty. And we saw a chance to say, hey, you should be retired permanently. We've had enough of you. And we did. There was enough of General Soleimani left to identify him as General Soleimani. Apparently it was a ring. And during his funeral procession, another 50-some-odd Iranians died being trampled. So you understand the level of barbarism that is normal in a place like Iran. Now, I wrote an article Tuesday discussing the fact that although it was expected for the U.S. to have some sort of response to Iranian aggression, what I didn't expect is much of the political class on a certain side to begin defending Iran. And I love that every single one of them had to, begin with, of course, he was a horrible person. Of course, he killed American soldiers. Of course, he wasn't supposed to be out of Iran. Of course, we saw an opportunity to take out the world's leading terrorist, subjectively speaking. However, it was the big orange man that did it, and somehow that's bad. Now, once that happened, once that narrative was established, the entire news media began going full throttle with two separate narratives. Narrative A, the draft is starting and everyone's getting conscripted and we're all going to be flown to Iran to invade it. Now, again, there are enough foolish people in this country, enough people who take, 5-10 minute breaks between, smoking their weed and, spending time in their mom's basement, that come up for air and hear this and they believe it. There are people who have made videos that they're about to get drafted, they're going off to war, and they're going to miss mama and their girlfriend. The second narrative that was being highly drummed up, exploited to no end, emphasized and talked about ad nauseum, is that this would be the start of World War III. Yes, we take out one of theirs, they take out 10 of ours, then we take out 100 of theirs, and before you know it, we've invaded Iran, and that'll be that. As I said last night, it reached a fevered pitch when the Iranians lobbed a few of their missiles over. Now, just in case you misread the situation and think this was anything other than saving face with their own people, the U.S. government received advanced knowledge that these missiles would be lobbed. This is now in the public sphere. So before the Iranians launched their quote-unquote surprise attack, somebody in the Iranian government called somebody in the U.S. government and said, "Hello, we are about to launch some missiles. Please be prepared to put on your helmet, yes." Now, they launched, 12 missiles. Apparently, all of them missed their target. Either that was intentional, or somebody who was in charge of pushing the button and doing missile guidance is going to get hung in Iran at high noon. So not only did we receive advanced knowledge that the Iranians were about to, quote unquote, deliver their slap back to the United States' face, but all of them missed the mark. A few minutes before recording this program, President Donald Trump came on the air and said no American servicemen were injured, harmed, or killed. There was no damage done to any of the U.S. base or barracks. And in the most profound way that he could, of throwing cold water on a hot fire, of making the entire media disillusioned to the point of suicidal thought, he said, "I'm willing to work if you are. I don't want war. I don't want to kill your people. The people we're after is terrorists. Let's call this even and move on from here." Now, the ball, as the kids like to say, is in the Iranians' court. I'm assuming there will be no further retaliation by the Iranians because they did what was necessary to save face with their zealots. You see, because it's not only these United States that has its political zealots. This is why this entire impeachment sham is still, I don't know what's happening with it, but it's, you scratch your head, you smirk, and you walk away. The reason this occurred is because we have political zealots who would accept nothing less but the impeachment of one Donald J. Trump, even though there was no criminality involved. But we've been over that already. So I'm sure once the remains of Mr. Soleimani were brought back to Iran, and they were laid to rest, there were zealots in the Iranian regime who insisted, we must strike back at the great Satan, we must decapitate him, we must destroy everything. Now, these are people who speak from emotion. These are people who allow emotion to guide them. I guarantee you that Khomeini has not been in power for so long being an emotional cat. He realizes that even though he might want to really, really bad, strike at the great Satan, he's kind of impotent. Not much he can do. I think the fact that his top general, the number one guy, well, actually the number two guy in the entire Iranian regime, got taken out at Baghdad airport by stealth death from above. That should have given all of these people ample reason to go, hold on a second. They're not playing. This isn't a game of cat and mouse. Because they kept pushing the envelope and pushing the envelope, believing that at some point we'd just give up and walk away. Or believing that we're just going to keep taking it. So they shot down a drone, then they burnt an oil field, or first they burnt an oil field and then they shot down a drone, then the attack on the embassy, then a U.S. consultant is killed, and finally we had to say, hey, we're here and we're not playing games. Now, contrary to the hope and prayer of every talking head on television, Donald Trump came on television today and said, let's make a deal. He did emphasize that our missiles are bigger than theirs, but he always does that. But yes, we're not starting World War III. Everyone can relax, at least for now. I'm going to read this from a news site so that you understand what was said. Then we're going to go into an article I put out this morning, and I wanted to do it early enough this morning that it was before any announcement the president made. See, I know how I see the geopolitical situation, and I am certain enough in my assessment and in the way I view it to make my position known before the dust settles. Because there are those, who just went full Monty and started yelling that this was World War III. There are those that kept silent and waited to see how it, pans out. Then there are those who know how this thing's going to shake out, who know that it's not yet time, and are willing to actually say it. Now, President Trump declared on Wednesday that Iran appears to be standing down in the wake of missile strikes on American bases in Iraq that he said resulted in no casualties. See, I think this is the thing that we have to emphasize. The fact that there were no casualties allows us to de-escalate. It allowed the Iranians to save face, and it needs to go no further. This is why the Iranians notified us that they were about to attack before they did, so that we take precautions so that there would be no casualties. This is why out of 12 missiles that they fired, apparently the only casualties was a poor Ukrainian airplane that was shot out of the sky. I think that the Iranians are being very cagey about that one. They're unwilling to release the black box because I think this is one of their missiles that sort of went the wrong way. And it hit an unintended target, which is a sad thing. But as far as our escalating crisis and the brink of World War III, Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned. President Trump said in remarks from the White House the morning after the attacks, "The American people should be extremely grateful and happy," Trump said, No Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime. He added, no Iraqi or American lives were lost. And this is the reason that they can put all this in the rear view and return to, look, we were never friends. Since 1979, we've sort of kind of been on a war footing, to be honest with you, with the Iranians. So this allows us to get back to that. It allows us to, not listen to the talking heads that keep going on about your kids getting conscripted and sent off to war just because Donald Trump's afraid of impeachment. Look, Donald Trump is not afraid of impeachment. That's another idiocy that's falling apart. When there's no evidence of a crime, why would you be afraid? Now, it is dividing the country because there are low information, low IQ voters that eat this stuff up. You had memes going around when they first announced that impeachment was a go, asking, when's Hillary going to be president? Because the fact is, we have grown comfortable with the idea of a dumbed-down society. We have grown comfortable with the idea of low IQ, low information voters. And the reason for this is because they are easier to control. And so it's all about the tweet. It's all about the messaging that you can get across in 10 words or less. And a lot of this stuff is more complicated than 10 words. But I'm going to get back to this article I wrote this morning because I'm not taking a victory lap. Again, my hope and prayer is that every single person listening to this program is a balanced individual. Don't hyperventilate at every news clipping you see. Don't go and throw the locks off the bunker and pop open the potatoes au gratin from Jim Baker every time somebody on television going, yup, this is it. Look, first of all, if war started with Iran, let's just say they're not a very competitive enemy. As I've said before, it would be a very short-lived war. Now, we have other enemies. We have enemies that would rival us in technology and rival us in power and in manpower. And those are the ones we should, keep our eye on, because they are hoping we misstep. They are hoping we declare war on Iran like all the talking heads want. But once again, allow me to emphasize once again, this administration has shown restraint. I know, Trump wants to lead us to war, just you wait. Apparently not. Because hot off the presses, we've just de-escalated with Iran, and if they behave, we leave them alone. So let's go to the article I wrote this morning, because there are a lot of native-born Americans who don't understand the differences in culture when it comes to a place like Iran, or pretty much any other Middle Eastern country, save for Israel, perhaps. You need to understand that there is a difference in culture, and that makes a difference in and of itself. And I began my article this morning, and I said, aggressors understand aggression. Bullies will continue to be bullies until the kid they keep giving wedgies and swirlies to finally has enough and stands up to them. Whenever someone being bullied turns the tables and pushes back, it is so surprising that more often than not, It throws the bully off kilter and causes them to stop. Sure, they'll bluster and shake their fist and threaten the beating of a lifetime after school behind the bleachers or in the parking lot. But everyone knows that the bully just got. And the illusion of unflappability is shattered. And I'd like to pause here and sort of contextualize what I mean. Look, up until the point that General Soleimani met his end, the Iranians really did think that they could do anything and there would be no pushback. For the last 8 years, the only thing that was done to them was the delivery of pallets full of cash. They did not expect it. This is why they took it so hard. This is why it discombobulated them, because it was an unexpected move on our part. They were used to a status quo. They were used to something happening over and over again, no matter what they did. And this administration said, enough. And they picked, by all accounts, the right target. Why do I say this? Well, first, because the man was a monster. Second, because every single person that was below him has to acknowledge the reality that if they got to him, they're likely easy pickings. And the one person above him, which is the Khomeini, has to think that if they got to him, it might be a bit harder for them to get to me, but man, they got to number 2. How hard will it really be to get to number 1? Now, let's continue with the article. People who seethe and foam and make threats they could never reasonably carry out do so out of impotence. They are angry, but also frustrated at the level of their own inability to do anything more meaningful than scream and yank their hair out by the root. And so they have to lash out, to make dire threats about how they will lay waste to the entirety of a continent, because a monster and a merchant of death was dealt with swiftly and with finality. I am not one of these guys that just toes the line. I do not toe the line with anyone or anything other than the Word of God. That, to me, is the only absolute, the only plumb line. Truth is the only hill I'm willing to die on, and so for those just itching to write a snippy response as to how I'm just seeing the situation from one side, allow me to assure you that I'm looking at it as objectively as a father of 2 can. Yes, I know those pesky kids again, but yes, they matter, at least to me. And I have to look at something even as complex as geopolitical machinations through that prism. Back in the day, the English had a saying that prevention was better than the cure. In so many words, do all you can not to get sick, rather than try and remedy the illness itself. It is better to prevent something, even if in the short term it might be frustrating or difficult, than to have to deal with the disease and attempt to find the subsequent cure somewhere down the line. The disease in this case would be an all-out war. It is not something any of us want to see. And if taking out a mass murderer in such a way that it makes all the other mass murderers hesitate, then you've succeeded in preventing something far, far worse. The thing about bullies, political or otherwise, is that they talk a good game until they realize that they're not safe from the after effects of what they're attempting to gin up. If someone like Soleimani could be taken out by a kid with a joystick and a screen 1,000 miles away, they realize that their grasp on power is tenuous at best, and their safety is illusory. The actions undertaken recently may be the best means of preventing an otherwise protracted, bloody, and uncertain cure. One makes themselves best understood by speaking the language the other party is fluent in. When a barbarian realizes that you not only understand but speak barbarism as fluently as they, it is an impacting realization, and one that just might make them take their foot off the throttle of an all-out war. It's not that we don't speak their language. It's that we choose not to, for the most part. And that's another key that we need to pause and reflect upon. It's not that we're incapable of gruesome things. It's not that we don't have the ability to flatten the whole of Iran in a single afternoon. It's that for the most part we choose not to. That can't be said of them. This is why there is a concerted effort not to allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. Because if Iran does get nuclear weapons, they will use them. Understand this. So, again, it's not that we don't speak their language. We choose not to, at least for the most part. Yes, I know, unbecoming, uncouth, beneath us, but power struggles, kingdoms, monarchies, governments, turf wars, tribes, and tribalism have been bloody business since there were enough of us roaming the earth to coalesce into a group and try to take what the other group had by force. It will be this way until the Prince of Peace returns and his kingdom is established. If we wanted to pick a fight, we've had ample reasons throughout the years since the unpleasantness with Iran all started back in the late 1970s. Even as recently as these past couple of years, we've had everything from embassy attacks to drones being shot down to soldiers maimed by IEDs funded by the Iranian regime. I am not naive enough to believe in utopia, global peace, bloodless wars, or whatever other nonsense is being bandied about. Even in knitting, there is sometimes bloodshed, never mind in war. I just don't think it's a war that we're after in this particular situation. If they escalate, it will be another story altogether. Time will tell. And the last paragraph of my article was proven true about 4 hours after it was published. Because rather than declare war on Iran, which is something that every talking head on television really, really wanted to see happen. And let's just talk about that for a second. How grotesque and soulless of an individual do you have to be to hope and pray for a war that will inevitably cost American lives just so you can get the upper hand politically, just so you can have something to report on the evening news with that just universal smirk? Who was it? O'Donnell. He's a has-been on MSNBC. He was gloating last night about the fact that the Iranians launched 12 rockets. Now, Mr. O'Donnell had no way of knowing that the Iranian rockets weren't targeting Americans by all accounts. He had no way of knowing that they let us know they were going to launch them before they did, because they didn't want any Americans to die either, because they understood what that would mean. A precedent has been set. If one of ours bleeds, one of yours bleeds. And that's a very different response than the previous administration, where if one of ours bleeds, we'll give you $1 billion cash. Look, like him or not, the Iranians right now don't know what to do except make themselves very, very tiny, cover themselves with a burqa and a blanket, and hope that little drone camera doesn't get them. It's good to be so out of the box that you have to second guess every decision you make as a nation because you don't know how the other guy's going to react. You see, they shot down a U.S. drone and we did nothing. We didn't retaliate. We didn't bomb them. And for an instant, for a brief moment, the mullahs and all of the leading political class of Iran goes, phew, he is like the other one. You remember the one with the big ear who sent us many monies? They are the same. They do nothing. Look at him. We shoot down their drone. They say, hey, it's okay. Then they go and attack the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. No immediate response. All we did was reinforce the embassy. We sent some boys from the south who chew gum and know how to shoot good, put them on the walls and said, have at it. And they dispersed. Because even if they got paid for chanting, death to America, while trying to get somebody to give them a visa to come here, you know, even if they'd gotten paid, I'm not going to die for $50. So it wasn't an organic revolution against the American tyranny in Baghdad. It was Iranian money that fostered this. And once we put some Marines on the walls with big shiny guns and nice bright scopes, they realized these cats aren't playing. But the mistake they made is that somewhere in all the hubbub, an American asset got killed. I don't believe it was an American citizen. I think it was an Iraqi translator. Now, there was no immediate response. And so, the Iranian number 2 says, I will go to Iraq, my sheikh. I will go to Iraq and make sure we succeed in taking down the embassy. We shall burn the American flag, and the world will know that we are strong. Now, we had our intelligence. Like everywhere else in the world, especially in a place like the Middle East or Iraq or Iran, where people are impoverished, if you know who to pay, you'll get what you want. And so somewhere down the line, the information was passed on that none other than Mr. Soleimani, the general himself, was flying to Baghdad in the dead of night. And that's when we decided maybe it's time we show them that we're aware of what they're doing. Maybe it's time we show them that we're different than the past administration. That there will be no pallet of cash waiting on a tarmac. Now, by all the reports that have been coming out, the reason Mr. Soleimani was in Iraq was to organize attacks on American soldiers, on the American embassy, and on American bases. And that's when death from above came suddenly. And the only thing left of Mr. Soleimani was a ring he liked to wear. And that's when the collective breath of the Iranian government caught in their throat and they realized, uh-oh, I think we just messed up. As I said at the beginning of the program, because they have enough zealots in their own government, like we have in ours, there needed to be a response. They needed to have a show of force. We must show the great Satan that we will not just sit there while they kill our general. And again, the fact that they let us know they were about to do it and that every single one of their rockets missed the target, wink, wink, goes to show that the Iranians really don't want to pick a fight. I think this was their way of saying, all right, we get it. We get it. No further lessons are needed. We get it. And the latest article that has just popped up was that President Donald Trump described Iran's attack on Iraqi bases hosting U.S. troops Tuesday night, in which there were 15 missiles fired, but no American casualties. Just think of that. You have 15 missiles fired, yet not one casualty. Somebody should have died by accident, one of these missiles just falling on their head. Not one casualty. Because this was a very well orchestrated farce to save face by the Iranians. And President Trump described it as a decision by Iran to stand down. The unusual description of a military operation both explained the Iranian regime's apparent decision not to strike American targets directly and the Trump administration's decision not to retaliate again. Trump said, "I am pleased to inform you the American people should be extremely grateful and happy no Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime." Again, key point, very important point. Because if one American life would have been lost, then yes, I do believe at this point, big bad planes with big bad bombs would be flying over Iran. We suffered no casualties, all of our soldiers are safe, and only minimal damage was sustained at our military bases. Our great American forces are prepared for anything. Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned, except for the media, who are currently getting sloshed. They're calling their dealers and asking for extra cocaine because they are entering a spiral of depression. How dare he not start a war? Because dead bodies makes great news. To them, it's not about the nation. Look, every single outlet last night was bringing in the feed of the Iranian television, showing them fire off rockets. There is absolutely no love of nation by these people. Just a seething hatred for Donald Trump, and as long as he gets his comeuppance, as long as he's made to look bad, who cares how many American soldiers die? It's not Don Lemon who's going to do it. He's not going to die. It's just astounding to me. But let's continue this. Trump recounted that the U.S. had eliminated Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the terrorist Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force, essentially without cost. At the head of the Quds Force, Soleimani was personally responsible for some of the absolutely worst atrocities, Trump explained. He added, he trained terrorist armies, including Hezbollah, launching terrorist strikes against civilian targets. He fueled bloody civil wars all across the region. He viciously wounded and murdered thousands of U.S. troops, including the planting of roadside bombs that maim and dismember their victims. But to the U.S. media, this is a former bodybuilder, a grandfather, an austere religious scholar. No, the media in America is not biased. They tell it like it is, wink, wink. Soleimani directed the recent attacks on U.S. personnel in Iraq that badly wounded 4 service members and killed 1 American. And he orchestrated the violent assault on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. In recent days, he was planning new attacks on American targets, but we stopped him, said the president. Soleimani's hands were drenched in both American and Iranian blood. He should have been terminated a long time ago. By removing Soleimani, we have sent a powerful message to terrorists. And I agree with this. There couldn't have been a more powerful message. And the message was this: if you value your life, you will not threaten the lives of our people. Simple message, succinct if you will, but it gets the point across, don't you think? While announcing immediate punishing sanctions, the president also said that the door was now open to negotiations towards making a deal with Iran that makes the world a safer and more peaceful place. We must also make a deal that allows Iran to thrive and prosper and take advantage of its enormous untapped potential. Iran can be a great country, the president said. Trump noted that the U.S. is not only the strongest nation in the world, but that it is developing even greater military power. But he concluded with a message, and this is important, to all those of you that think he's a warmonger and he wants to take us to war and all this stuff that I've had to, just go, come on, just use your common sense. Look, Donald Trump is not Lindsey Graham. If Lindsey Graham was president, we'd be in war right now. And I guarantee you he's annoying, if not outright angering, the war hawks in the Republican Party by not going forward with war. I guarantee you someone like Lindsey Graham is not happy with him because he chose to say, all right, if you want peace, we can have it. If you escalate, we'll teach you that it hurts. But for now, just behave. Trump noted that the U.S. is not only the strongest nation in the world, but that it is developing even greater military power. But he concluded with a message to the people and the leaders of Iran. We want you to have a future, and a great future, one that you deserve, one of prosperity at home and harmony with the nations of the world. The United States is ready to embrace peace with all who seek it. And that was the message that the president gave, pretty much putting a pin in the whole notion that World War III was upon us. To hear some in the media talk about it yesterday and the day before, to hear how just insane they got, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility to ask, when does Donald Trump get the Nobel Prize for ending World War III? Because in their estimation, we were in it. Every single news outlet was saying, this is World War III. Welcome to World War III. World War III is upon us. When will the draft begin? We know that World War III has already started. Well, if it started, when does he get the Nobel Prize for ending it? Because, as I said, I wanted to make my position clear before a decision was made so that you understand. There are reactionaries in Christian circles whose only go-to is the end. World War III, finality, explosions, blow-ups. Look, it is coming, just not yet. I'm not going to hope for it. I'm not going to bang drums for it. I'm not going to encourage it. I'm not going to pray for it. Unless God gives me a revelation, I can use my abilities and aptitude to judge the situation and see what potential ramifications there could be. Look, unless the Chinese and the Russians both came out and said to America, if you attack Iran, we will attack you, there was no other option for Iran but to try to save face and then go away. The Russians and the Chinese are not in the position to want war with us just yet. So as I said, put the lid back on the bucket of potatoes au gratin and go enjoy a real burger. You may need the potatoes au gratin at some point. But for now, be thankful that World War III has been averted. And you can hug your kids and go enjoy the day, even if it's as brutally cold as Wisconsin is today. The sun is still shining. There are no mushroom clouds to be seen anywhere in the vicinity. American soldiers aren't dying. Iranian people aren't dying. No one's blowing us up. We're not blowing anyone up. And it's just another day. And far too often, we take the uneventful days for granted. Far too often, we lump all these days that are like any others in one giant pile and go, nothing happened. It wasn't extraordinary. Until you have something like this just coming out of nowhere, with people losing their minds thinking it's World War III. And then you realize, hey, you know those uneventful days? Those days when nothing really happens? Those days when you wake up and you kiss your kids and you kiss your wife and you make her coffee and you make the kids breakfast and you take them to school and you come to work? They're not half bad, are they? They're actually pretty good. So appreciate what you have, because it can all change in an instant. And you look back on these humdrum days, these non-eventful days, and go, wow, don't I wish we could have those back. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. May God bless you. May God keep you. It promises to be a very interesting year, and we will be with you every step of the way. But the overarching message, I think, as far as I'm concerned, is that if the Lord is on your side, you have nothing to fear. And no, I'm not talking politically or as a nation. I am talking, however, as an individual. I woke up as jovial today as I did yesterday, as I did the day before, because I know that my Redeemer lives. If he does, and you know he does, there is nothing to fear. God bless you. And Gino, if you got anything to say, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Mike. I think you pretty well put everything in perspective. I'm glad that people can hear the show today and realize we shouldn't panic at every turn of the road. Trust the Lord and trust that God has everything in control. Please check out our website, handofhelp.com. I would definitely urge you to try to get the book Through the Fire Without Burning, or the video Wake Up America, which has the message of God in the book and on the video. Also, we have new books, one that Mike's put out called The Battle Ready Believer. And please check out the newsletters on the website, which really can give you a good insight on what we do in Romania and also in Ukraine. Lord bless you. I pray you have a great day in the Lord. Thank you for listening to The Light of Truth. This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.